Good afternoon, everyone in the UK, and good morning to everybody in the US. Welcome to today's webinar, The Secret Sauce of Succession Planning. We're just going to wait for another minute for the last few joiners, as I can still see some people hopping on right now. Okay, I think we're about ready to start. So welcome everyone who has just joined to today's webinar, The Secret Sauce of Succession Planning. Just a quick introduction to me. I'm Mark, CEO and founder of Staff Circle, and also the inventor of Success Circles, which is a 9-box grid alternative. Plus, I'm also one of the architects of the world's first one-click competency framework builder. From a people development perspective, I've been building UK and US businesses and teams for about 28 years, and more recently concentrated on architecting tools to help organizations drive employee productivity, engagement, and progression. And so today we're going to be discussing succession planning and all of the tools and processes we need to have in place in order to optimize these. But at the end of the day, we must remember why we need to do this, which is, of course, to make our organizations stronger, more valuable, and also more enjoyable and a more rewarding place to work. Now, I'm going to keep this webinar definitely to under 30 minutes because I know you're all super busy, and I have to say at the end of this session, I'm going to be offering you all something pretty special, but only if you're here right to the end of the webinar. Okay, let's get started. So, why does succession planning feel like such a challenge? It's a great question, and one that I always get asked by customers. And I think there are really sort of three main challenges in this. Challenge one, I think, is an over-reliance on reactive processes, sort of backed up by low quality data as well. Organizations often focus on replacing employees when vacancies arise, instead of proactively planning for transitions. And this, of course, leads to rushed decisions, misaligned hires, and leaves gaps in leadership or critical roles, things like single points of dependency or single person dependencies. And this, of course, increases overall business risk. Challenge number two, a lack of strategic alignment and out-of-date data. Many organizations treat succession planning as a standalone HR task or process rather than integrating it with a broader business strategy. And this results in plans that don't really address critical future needs or align with longer-term business goals. Also, the data is just not that up to date based on organizations that use annual reviews or annual performance reviews to do succession planning. The way I like to position this is, go and ask your CFO if they would make important business decisions or on financial data that's 12 months old. And of course they wouldn't, they couldn't. So why on earth are we relying on annual performance data to drive really important succession planning decisions? Challenge number three is a difficulty in identifying and developing talent overall. Spotting high potential employees isn't straightforward, and development pathways can be unclear or poorly implemented. It's quite difficult to do this at scale in a consistent and reliable way. Also, role-based skills aren't always defined in a deep enough way. For instance, describing the statements for that skill or competency level required by the role. And of course, this leads to loose assessments with internal hiring and with external hiring increases the potential of mishires, leading to early churn, which is an expensive thing. So there must be a better way. And of course, there is indeed a better way. The way forward is to develop, deploy, and integrate a competency framework. Now, what benefits do a competency framework or a competency system have? Well, the reality is a competency framework enables you to systemize roles and progression across the entire organization. But first, I'm going to start with a statistic. According to the World Economic Forum, 87% of companies worldwide are experiencing material skills gaps or anticipate those will happen within the next 5 years. So a competency framework enables you to standardize, visualize, and address those skills gaps proactively, either through employee training, experience, or talent acquisition or succession planning. Furthermore, according to Deloitte, organizations with well-defined competency frameworks see a 23% increase in return on investment for the training, because the training is far more targeted. And finally, employees who do meet the defined competency benchmarks are 50% more likely to succeed in their roles. And let's not forget that we really have entered the era of the skills-based economy. And we all need the tools to help us optimize our organizations in this environment. From a scalability perspective, of course, having this framework in place creates this structured map of your organization, which defines how the employees move through it. But I think the number one benefit of having a competency framework is that through it, organizations can reduce unwanted employee attrition, stop organizations from losing their best players, because as humans we all want to see a way forward, a progressive movement of either our careers or our abilities in the current role. And having this structure will make it much more readily available to your entire workforce. Okay, next slide. So an integrated competency framework is better. On this slide, I'm going to describe to you what we think an integrated framework is and why it delivers more benefits than a non-integrated framework. So let's start by talking about a non-integrated framework. It's basically a competency framework that has been manually created by yourselves. Maybe it resides in a spreadsheet or a series of documents across the organization. But the data it contains isn't integrated into the day-to-day operations of your organization. To illustrate what I mean by this, I'm going to give you a specific example of how our customers use an integrated competency framework and how that delivers far more value. Now, you can see in this diagram how the competency framework is at the center of pretty much everything. So, right in the middle. Obviously, it says success circles, and that's our new visualization that I'll talk about later. I'm going to give you an example of how it can be used to identify a skills gap for a salesperson, in this instance, an account executive, and how this will lead to much more targeted training, but also how it can give the manager the ability to validate training can be executed in their day-to-day operations. So in this example, the account exec has a skill called sales forecasting. I'm sure we're all familiar with the notion of sales forecasting or forecasting your sales numbers. And this has been described, this skill and this competency level has been described in the following screen, which I'm going to switch to. Okay, so here you can see the account executive role described in the middle. And over to the right-hand side, there are all of the skills that are required by this role, but also the skills or competency levels for those skills. Now, you'll see that each one has a competency statement, and it's obviously in small writing, but I've actually blown it up underneath. And these are the things that AE, or the person who's inhabiting that AE role, or people inhabiting that AE role, should be able to do as far as sales forecasting concerns. So you can easily read that statement there. So during a skills assessment, which can be conducted as part of a monthly or weekly check-in, the line manager can now see exactly what the direct report should be able to do and should be able to execute as part of that particular skill. And if they can't, maybe they're at a level below that, then a development objective can be created and the exact competency statement can be pasted into that objective. So the manager can review it in the next check-in, along with any of the training that's been completed and taken in order to support this new competency level. Having that statement makes it very obvious what we're looking for in terms of capability. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how a skills gap can easily be identified. And obviously, for a deeper dive and explanation, I'm going to be offering you something at the end of this webinar that should be of value to you. Okay, I think now we're just about to move to our questions section, because there's been a number of questions that we've had on previous webinars. I'm going to cover some of the main ones today, which hopefully will cover some of the ones that you want to ask. But if you have got additional questions, please just drop us an email or send it in the chat afterwards and we'll endeavour to answer it. And one of the things that I haven't talked about, which I think I will just for a second, is why we believe that AI is such a game changer in terms of succession planning. And this comes down to it's always one of the questions we get asked, which is, we'd love to be able to have a competency framework, but how do we get there? How do we move from where we are now to having that built and rolled out? Because the average competency framework takes a long time to build, and what AI can do is help reduce the time and cost materially in creating this competency framework. Helps with things like dynamic skills mapping, and overall gives organizations the ability to deploy this type of technology, whereas before maybe they just wouldn't have had the budget to do. So let me just move to the first question, which is the specifics of how this helps. Well, as I just mentioned, the competency framework will help you not only map this career pathway or pathways throughout your organization, but provide skills analysis so you can understand not only the gaps in the current role, but also what gaps exist for a person if they want to move to a future role in their career path or maybe in a different pathway. So this brings those statements to life. And when you combine those skills and those skills analysis along with a capability analysis using performance management and also cultural and values alignment using behavioral skills, it really provides this full 360-degree view of the person and what is required for a balanced succession planning strategy inside your organizations. So, on to question number 2. What are the first steps in creating a competency framework for an organization that doesn't already have a competency framework? Well, if you don't already have a framework in place, I think there are 6 main steps if you want to manually create one. Step 1, identify the core organisational values and your strategic goals. Number 2, define competencies for each of those roles that you have in your organisation and align those with the goals. Collaborate with stakeholders, i.e. managers, employees, leadership, in order to refine and validate this framework. And collate all of the role specifications and enrich them using tools like ChatGPT and others. You can enrich the specification and the descriptions of those roles. And look at existing processes that you have inside your organisation and see how they can be integrated into this framework, or create new processes where required where they don't exist. We actually have a downloadable template for organisations not ready yet to systemize using tools like Staff Circle, and I can always get a link sent out if you're interested in that. But if you are using a system like Staff Circle, it's generally 4 main steps. Obviously, step 1 is deploy Staff Circle or a tool like us. Connect your Active Directory or your HRIS system. This synchronizes all of the existing roles that exist in your organization over to the platform. Click the one-click competency builder. Go and make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. It'll automatically build all the roles for you, fill out the ones that don't exist yet, define all the skills, and then you can go back in and manually adjust as necessary. And then you can then roll out skills assessments, career development plans, succession planning, all through the platform very, very easily because you've got this underlying framework. Question 3. What level of technical expertise is required to use these AI solutions effectively? And it's a great question because when we think of AI, we think of quite a lot of complexity and unknown or unobtained knowledge. But most AI tools are designed to be pretty user-friendly. ChatGPT, if you can throw a prompt together, I think it requires minimum technical expertise. But it is true that HR teams will benefit from some basic training to implement AI outputs if you're going to be using ChatGPT. Advanced analytics are usually handled by the tool itself. ChatGPT doesn't really have them, but at Staff Circle, we've sort of taken it one step further and released the world's one-click framework builder, so you have absolutely 0 technical expertise required. It can actually be used in 3 modes, sort of fully automatic, as I mentioned, semi-automatic, where it works as an AI assist, or fully manual, where you already have got this framework in place and you just want to use the AI to maybe enrich it, maybe improve some of the phraseology and so on. And finally, question 4, are these systems expensive? It's always a question that gets asked either at the beginning or during the sales process. Are they out of reach for small to medium-sized organizations? And I guess the short answer to this is no, not anymore. It's true previously, enterprise versions were always available for this type of capability, and those systems cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. However, we at Staff Circle, and I can't speak for anyone else, but we specialize in SME and mid-market organizations up to a few thousand employees, which means that our software is in the thousands, not the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's definitely now within the reach of small and medium-sized businesses to deploy the kind of capability that up until now has only really been available for enterprise organizations. And we think that's pretty exciting. Okay, finally, we've reached the last slide, which is our special offer. Now, normally our consultancy service is about $400 an hour, but because you've sat through my presentation, I'd like to give you a free of charge 1-hour consultancy session. And this is where we'll listen to your goals and your strategies and hopefully offer up a structured way to help you get there. Of course, there's no obligation to use us, and quite often we advise other software or maybe external consultancy services rather than using our tool. But if you do want to use that time, you can see what our system's capable of. We think it's pretty special. then you can use this same link. You can just scan it with your phone or type the URL below it into the browser, and you can book a session with myself or one of my colleagues. So that's it really. I'd like to thank you all for joining. I look forward to working with you, hopefully some of you sometime soon. And in the meantime, I really hope you all have a great end of 2025 and a prosperous end to the year. And thank you very much for joining me today. Take care.